Could they have found Noah's Ark? And the bigger story, actually, is the Adam and Eve conspiracy theory, they call it. It's all interesting, and it's all coming together. According to deep ground penetrating radar scans, these researchers say the structure of this mound is consistent with the biblical description of Noah's Ark. Now, I can already hear my secular friends and liberal viewers saying, this is nonsense. There's no Noah's Ark. It's not true. Hold on there. You don't have to always view these things through a mystical lens. Could be viewed through a historical lens. And that's how many on TikTok are taking this. A viral trend that's been going around for a while, but, a few months ago, I believe, states that every 6,500 years is a cataclysm on the earth related to the poles shifting. And when that happens, it triggers a shifting of the planet, a movement of the oceans, effectively causing a great flood to sweep over many lands. In which case, perhaps someone could have built a large vessel fearing or predicting that this storm was going to happen, and then having survived it. They wrote the story down, and it was passed down generations, some thousands of years later. There are many people who believe that it's magic and many people who believe that it's fiction, that you shouldn't believe in magic. Or, to those of faith, it could literally be that God flooded the earth and gave a warning to a man to build a ship to preserve certain life. Believe whatever you want. Right now, one of the big trends on social media is this fear over the poles shifting. There have been a series of individuals, there are many individuals who have covered strange phenomena in our magnetosphere, solar storms, power outages, leading some to conclude there may be a pole shift happening. Now, to be completely honest, mainstream news is telling us the poles are shifting. I mean, you can just Google it. Here's one from December. Earth's north magnetic pole has officially been repositioned. The fascinating thing was the stories about people flying planes and the data wasn't syncing up because the pole moved. And we use Earth's magnetosphere for our instrumentation, for our GPS, for our compasses, etc. What if? What if it's not biblical in the sense that it's not divine? What if quite literally every 6,500 years and the poles shift, it triggers a flood and a man built a boat? Maybe. Let me read these stories for you, and we'll see where we're at. New York Post says Noah's Ark site fully preserved. Secrets discovered in radar scans by scientists, not what you'd expect to see. What does that mean? What they actually said is, it is exactly what you'd expect to find if there were a man-made boat. Why did they title it that way? Call it Radars of the Lost Ark. American researchers claim to have cracked one of the Bible's enduring mysteries after using radar technology to map the possible remains of Noah's Ark. It is exactly what you'd expect to find if this were a man-made boat, consistent with the biblical specifications of Noah's Ark. Andrew Jones, an independent researcher, told the Christian Broadcasting Network while revealing the groundbreaking results of his multi-year project. I look at it this way. I always hear these stories. You ever hear about the myth of the genies and the jinns? They'd grant your wishes. Of course, you've seen Aladdin. Let's look at it from a fantastic point of view. The genie appears before Aladdin and says, "Hey, pal, what do you want?" And he says, "I want to be a prince." And then he blinks, and then the guy is on a flying carpet, and he's got a bunch of elephants and gold statues. That's actually kind of believable. But hold on. What do people think genies are? Well, it's Jafar who says, "I wish to be an all-powerful genie." And then the genie snaps, and then Jafar literally transforms into a genie. To be fair, also, the monkey turns into an elephant. Now, that's mystic. Let me put it this way. If Jeff Bezos walked up to you and said, "Tell me what you desire, and I will make your wish come true," what would you ask him for? Obviously, you're not going to ask him to turn your monkey into an elephant. He's going to be like, "I can't do that." No, but I can give you $1 million, a private jet, a yacht. I can put you on a private island. This is the thing. People look back on these stories, and for some reason in their minds, they can't separate the modern, measured approach to what it would mean versus this mystic journey. So here's what I hear. And I'm not a Christian, so I know some Christians may completely disagree. By all means, feel free to. When we talk about Noah's Ark, and God says, "Bring 2 of every animal," We get these liberals being like, two of every animal? You mean like two of each species of beetle? There's millions of species of beetle. You can't. That's not what I hear. I hear there's a guy who's got a farm and someone says a flood's going to come. Make sure you get two of each animal. They quite literally mean the animals you have. So this is literally, like the way I see it, is separate from the mystical, magical ark that carries every species ever existed. And you're talking about a dude who built a big boat and put 2 cows, 2 chickens, 2 pigs, 2 goats, 2 llamas, 2 alpacas, 2 camels, because that's the animals they had. Not that he was getting every single bug ever. That's why I bring up the jinn and the genie thing. Because if you go back and you look at some of these myths, what could it have been? The jinn, maybe there were aliens. I don't know. But when they're telling you they would grant your wish, they weren't saying they give you magic powers. They're saying they'd build you a house or something. Whether it was actually a mystical entity or not, I don't know. It's silly. Anyway, I digress. You've got this big mount. And they say Jones works with Noah's Ark Scans, which he described as a loose organization of individuals interested in pursuing scientific work, promoting the site of the Ark. Jones and his team were attempting to solve the age-old question of whether the legendary vessel is buried in the mountains of eastern Turkey, roughly 18 miles south of Mount Ararat, which the Bible describes as the boat's final resting place. The exact spot is the Durupinar site, a 538-long boat-shaped mound. With the same book of Genesis described dimensions as the Ark, said to have saved humanity and animals alike from a catastrophic flood more than 4,300 years ago. While the idea of this area houses the legendary life raft, an object central to Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, is a topic of dispute. Recent scans appear to indicate that it could be the case. Maybe. They go to mention what the Bible states about it. They say that Jones used ground-penetrating radar to detect what appeared to be a 13-foot tunnel traversing the center of the formation. These same scans captured a trifecta of subterranean layers that were allegedly dead ringers for the Bible's description of the boat's 3 decks. In other words, it was literally ship-shaped. Interesting. Given the age of the vessel, Jones said he doesn't expect to find anything fully preserved, claiming there'd be remnants. The remains constitute a chemical imprint, pieces of wood, and the ground. I mean, sure, it's thousands of years. There's rain. Also uncovered were angular structures situated 20 feet beneath the surface that the team surmises could be the quarters beneath the deck-like surface, making this potentially more than just a geological formation, as many scientists have posited. This is not what you'd expect to see if the site were simply a solid block of rock or the result of random mud flow debris, said Jones, who felt it matched the biblical specifications of Noah's Ark. Now you can see here, all of the animals being loaded onto the Ark. You got like lions, horses, cows. And I'm going to go ahead and say like, okay, maybe rabbits, and all the birds flying in. I mean, birds probably landed on this vessel if there was a flood to survive, but I don't think it needs to be magical. I don't think so. And I think, of course, there are many people who are going to look at this from a biblical perspective and say it's absolute. The flood washed away the earth, killed everything, and the animals were saved on the Ark. I say to all of the secular types, it could literally be that a catastrophic flood happened. Take a look at this. It's from 2023. Adam and Eve theory. Catastrophe as Earth's magnetic poles reverse. Heavens me. They say that every 6,500 years, a disaster on the scale of the biblical flood strikes Earth. They go to mention, what do we have here? Jimmy Corsetti. And Rogan was talking with, blah, blah, blah. Rogan's talking to him. Oh, come on. Joe Rogan was recently sparking this blah, blah, blah. He was having a interview with Jimmy Corsetti. During the conversation, Rogan introduced the Adam and Eve theory, an idea lacking evidence and originating from the Adam and Eve story, a book published in 1965 by Chan Thomas, an electrical engineer who claimed to possess psychic abilities. Yeah, I don't really believe that stuff. Thomas, formerly associated with blah, 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 we don't care. They go down and say, Corsetti elaborated on this idea, arguing that the reversal of the magnetic poles would cause the Earth to essentially stand still, leading to unprecedented overheating. He also mentioned that wind and water would maintain their momentum as winds at the equator move at speeds of approximately 1,609 kilometers an hour. According to the theory, this cataclysmic event would result in extreme weather phenomena, including tsunamis. Corsetti specified that the reversal occurs in cycles of 6,500 years, with a 90-degree flip, followed by a correction around the 7th day. Rogan remarked, it's not to say that we aren't polluting, we certainly are. It's not to say that we shouldn't improve, we certainly should. But if the effing magnetic poles might shift and we might get hit by a giant rock from space, we might have bigger problems. if we're going to be concentrating on nonsense, which is really par for the course with human beings, we're going to be concentrating on these things we're not really going to fix over the short term. When something might happen, that makes all of it a moot point. Experts categorically refute these claims, labeling them baseless and lacking scientific support. Media Matters for America, a nonprofit organization, reported the theory, and excerpts from the interview accumulated over 20 million views on TikTok within 6 months, without addressing its fallacious nature. Martin Malanchik, senior researcher at NASA, at the NASA Research Center, dismissed the theory, telling The Verge it's totally bogus. If that's what happened every 6,500 years, we would certainly see it. It would be in all the records. The amount of energy to bring that about is tremendous, and there's nothing to initiate it. Now, I don't agree with this idea that the poles are going to flip and it's going to cause all these things. I don't know. What I can say is there are interesting questions around why woolly mammoths have undigested plant matter in their bellies. It's an honest question. Now, I'm just a layman. I read things on the internet and complain. So what do I know? The argument from these individuals, these theorists, is that the woolly mammoth was in a temperate climate eating plants. Something happened causing it to freeze very quickly. Where were the plants in these very cold areas where they have uncovered these woolly mammoths? Interesting. The argument is that the mammoths were closer to the equator, then the poles flipped, the planet tilted, and all of a sudden they were in a very cold place, froze. Mainstream researchers say, yeah, actually, they just fell into water. They fell into cold water. They're woolly because they're mammoths that are in cold places. They fell into cold water and they froze, and that's why the plant matter didn't get digested. Then the question is, where were the plants growing in the cold where the water was cold enough for them to freeze so quickly? I don't know. You can give me an answer. I'm not saying I believe in any of this stuff just because of that, but there's interesting questions. Perhaps there is a conspiracy as to why we are not learning about a potential magnetic pole reversal and a planet flipping. Powerful, wealthy billionaires, they're building underground bunkers. Why? I don't know. Because they have money and they can, I guess. To be honest, I'm not even that well off relative to these people. Like, we do well here. I do well, of course. And I don't have an underground bunker, but I do have emergency food, ammo, and water. And, stored underground somewhere. Because it's not that expensive. Now, if I was worth $100 billion, of course I'd build a bunker. Why wouldn't I? So I'm not really moved by this. But there is still an argument. If the powers that be were told, guys, we're overdue for a magnetic pole shift and the planet could tilt. Antarctica could move to the equator. It's going to shift everything. The first question is, what do we tell the public? You tell them nothing. You think a truck driver transporting goods from San Pedro in California to Nebraska is going to keep doing that if you told them the world's coming to an end? Nope. Some might, most won't. They're going to be with their families and they're going to start digging bunkers and building arks. We don't want an economy based off that. So what do? If we knew the catastrophe was coming, we would need to create alternative energy sources that can power up anywhere. It would be very important for us to develop solar panels, electric vehicles, wind turbines, geothermal, energy that can be deployed after a catastrophe where you don't need transportation lines, roads getting wiped out. How do we get electricity? Wind turbines. We can put them up. You still need all the concrete, but they can generate energy in seemingly remote locations without access to oil. Electric cars can then be charged off that grid, allowing us the tools to begin to rebuild. Now, of course, we want petroleum-based infrastructure. It's much more efficient. But you need to source the petroleum and transport it. Some areas will still be able to do that with pumps. What about the areas that can't, that get isolated or cut off? We're going to need solar farms and wind farms. Hey, just so happens they're building a whole bunch of those right now. So I don't know, man. Who am I? Interesting nonetheless. That's all I can say. And if the catastrophe does come, I hope you guys are in the mountains. I'm not going to hold my breath, though. Everybody's always prophesizing the end of days, and here we are. You know what I mean? We have an optimism bias. We have a normalcy bias. I think the chances of this really happening are astronomical. I think the chances of that being Noah's Ark are also astronomical, but who knows? Who knows? It's fun to think about, though. I'll leave it there. Smash the like button. Share the show with everyone you know. Follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all in the next segment.